Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to practice and improve in a relaxed and natural way. And I want to start off today's episode by asking you a question. Are you sometimes afraid to express your opinion? Or perhaps, if you're not afraid, do you feel nervous to say what you truly think? And I think we all do in certain areas, but to different degrees, don't we? Even in our native language, whatever that is, certain situations can make it quite difficult to express our opinion, let alone in our second language, particularly when it is a contrary opinion to someone else. So you're in a social setting, someone says something, you don't quite agree with it. Well, how do you express your opinion in a tactful way, but really shows what you think? In business, someone presents an idea and you don't agree with it, or you don't think it's the right route for your that particular project to go down. How do you share your contrary opinion or your different opinion in a constructive way? So in this episode, we're really going to dive into how to express our opinions without sounding rude or confrontational, because we're allowed to express our opinions, aren't we? Particularly when we truly believe it, but there's often something that holds us back. So we're going to look at what that is, but also we're going to look at some practical suggestions that we can use in English to express our opinion in different settings. For example, like I said earlier, in social settings, business, or a view that we have. How can we express or let people know our opinion in a non-confrontational way and in a way that won't come off rude, particularly when speaking British English? So that's what we're going to discuss today. And I think this is just a really interesting topic because there's certain situations where I don't mind expressing my opinion, and I will. But I personally know the situations where sometimes I back off from expressing my opinion, even though I feel that it could help, or I feel that I should, or I feel strongly about something. I know the situations where I'm less likely to express what I think. Do you have situations like that? You know, can you think of situations where you personally are less likely to express your opinion? Well, if you can, I really hope that this episode will help you in many different ways, but also in areas where you use English to progress, particularly thinking of a career or work, friendships, relationships, whatever it is. It's a good one, this. Spent quite a bit of time preparing it, so I hope you enjoy it. And of course, as we go through, we got a vocabulary to look at. We've got different expressions. You'll have a chance to practice your reading, your speaking out loud if you repeat after me. Got a bit of everything. So that's today's podcast. But before we get into it, how are you doing? How's your week been? I hope it's been okay. It's been a bit better weather here in the southeast of England. I feel like we've had it rough for too long now. I think it's actually broken a record for the most consecutive days of rain. Forgive me if I've already mentioned this. I might well have done. I'm British. I'm going to talk about the weather. But this week's not been too bad. In fact, on Wednesday evening, it actually felt like a summer's evening. I think it was about 15, 16 degrees. My wife and I were driving home from somewhere, this most beautiful sunset, and we thought it would be rude to not go to the pub and have a pint. So that's what we did. And it just gave us a little taste of summer. And I'm looking forward to it. But it's funny, isn't it, with summer or looking forward to something? You don't want to wish the year away. I'm really careful of trying not to do that this year. It is wishing the year away or always thinking about the next thing that's months away. Just trying to be more present in the moment. But I'm very much ready for some good weather. And just a little update, as you can clearly see, if you did watch last week's episode, the office is not decorated yet. The paint is still sitting down there. I just have not got round to it. So who knows? Maybe next week we'll have a painted office. Probably not. I'll procrastinate on it. But there's hope. There's always hope. What are we if we don't have hope? So, yeah, let's get into this. Expressing your opinion. So we're really going to go through quite a few angles. We're going to approach a few different angles towards this idea of expressing your opinion. And even if you think you're someone, that you're fine, you've got no problem saying what you think. You've got no problem expressing your opinion. Maybe that's a problem in itself. If you are someone that perhaps always expresses your opinion in a firm way, puts across exactly how you feel, maybe there's something there as well that you can take from this podcast. So no matter where you are on the scale of expressing opinions, there's something here to help. So let's get into it. As always, we're going to take it bit by bit. If you are watching this podcast, or even if you're listening, a great way to improve your speaking skills, your British accent, fluency and pronunciation is to repeat after me or to read at exactly the same time. And that's called shadow reading. Great exercise. If you don't want to do that, you just want to chill and enjoy the English language, feel free. I do encourage a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, or something stronger. Whatever. Just relax and enjoy. So here we go. Expressing your opinion can feel uncomfortable. For many people, it creates anxiety. You might worry about sounding rude. You might fear conflict. You might come from a culture where disagreement is avoided. Or perhaps you simply don't feel confident enough in English to say what you really think. Perhaps you fall into one of those categories. It's true, isn't it? Sometimes expressing our feeling, it can make us feel uncomfortable. It makes your skin crawl a little bit. Or perhaps it creates anxiety. Maybe, you've got to share your opinion. It creates a bit of fear in you. Or perhaps you're worried that if you express your opinion, like it says, you're going to sound rude. Perhaps you fear conflict when we have to give an opinion that we know perhaps isn't going to be received well, or it's contrary. It could result in conflict, and we don't want that. Perhaps you come from a culture where disagreement is avoided. So you just bury it. You keep it to yourself. Or perhaps when it comes to your English, you just don't feel you're there. You don't feel your level's good enough and you don't feel confident enough to say what you think. Well, it's interesting because it goes on to say, here's something important. Expressing an opinion does not mean starting an argument. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be confrontational. And it certainly doesn't have to damage relationships. In fact, when done well, expressing your opinion is a sign of confidence, clarity, and respect, both for yourself and for others. Today we're going to look at how to express your opinion in different settings using natural British English and how to do it calmly and effectively. So we want to, at the outset, just kind of get this idea away that an opinion results in an argument. I know this is sometimes something that I've struggled with. I always feel that if you share a contrary opinion, that means it's going to start an argument. So we've got to get that idea out of our head. But what's true is the way that we share our opinion is often what starts an argument. That's what starts conflict. It doesn't have to be confrontational. There doesn't have to be drama surrounding it. It doesn't have to damage relationships and connections. In fact, it can do the opposite. That when we express our opinion well, it can show confidence. It can show clarity in what we think, what we mean, and how we want to progress. And also, expressing our opinion well is even a sign of respect for ourselves and for others. So we're going to really dive into how to express our opinion using natural British English, but in a way that it will be well received. But why does it matter? We've got an opinion. Surely we should just share it. We should just say it. Or maybe we shouldn't say it. Maybe we should just suck it up. Does it matter at all? Well, it does. I'm going to talk about something a little bit deeper now. What happens when you don't express your opinion? Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes, just keeping it to yourself is the wise option. At work, people might assume you've got nothing to add. In meetings, your ideas remain invisible. In friendships, you might quietly agree and later feel frustrated. In discussions, you might leave thinking, I should have said something. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When we stay silent, people don't automatically assume we agree. They often assume we don't have an opinion. Over time, that can affect how others see us, professionally and socially. Expressing your opinion is not about ego. It's about participation. If you contribute thoughtfully, people begin to see you as someone who thinks, reflects, and adds value. So I thought this was an interesting point. If we think about whether we should express our opinion, well, what happens when we don't? And of course, I'm going to keep saying throughout all of this, there's got to be balance, hasn't there? But what happens at work when we don't express our opinion, even though we've got them, got those good ideas, those good thoughts? But when we never express them, people could start to think, well, they've got nothing to add. Your value goes down. If you've got these great ideas, well, they remain invisible. Company doesn't see your potential, where you should go. In friendships, you just become the quiet one, the passive listener that doesn't have opinions, that just goes along with what everyone else says. And what's interesting is when we stay silent, even though we've got an opinion, that doesn't make people think that we necessarily agree. It just makes them think that we don't have any thought on it at all. And often to building strong relationships, that can be a real hindrance. It can affect how people see us professionally, how they see us socially. So we can see here that we're not talking about egos. We're not talking about always dogmatically pushing our opinion across, particularly in our second language. But it's how people view us. It's about participation. And you can do that in English. Really, no matter what level you are, it just takes preparation and adaptation. But when we are able to express our opinion, I would say particularly in a work setting, you start to be seen as someone with ideas, even if they're contrary. You get to be seen with someone with thoughts, someone who thinks outside the box, and someone that adds value. So when an opinion is expressed in the right time, in the right way, it's interesting that can actually raise our value and the value of what we offer. So you can see here that it really does matter, doesn't it? But why is it so difficult? So before we get into language, before we get into English language, let's talk about psychology. Many people struggle to express opinions because one of these 5 areas, and maybe you fall into these. Firstly, you might struggle because you want to avoid conflict. You don't want an argument. You don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to say something that upsets somebody. It shows that you care. You don't want to be judged. You're scared that if you express your opinion, you're going to be judged by that person. Perhaps you grew up in cultures that prioritize harmony over directness. A culture where it's all about just keep the peace, keep the harmony, which I want to put a little caveat here that I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if in situations, if you can keep that harmony, you can keep that peace, sometimes our opinions are best not said. But this is talking about when we need to say something in that way. Or the last point is perhaps you just don't feel your English is good enough. You haven't got the right vocabulary. You don't feel like you can express it in English. So you just suppress that opinion. I know this happens to a lot of students that I've worked with. I'll get on the Zoom call now. So I'm just so frustrated. I just got kind of walked over in this business meeting. I couldn't think quick enough. I didn't agree, but I didn't know how to express that I didn't agree. And now I'm kind of just viewed as a person that does it all. Everyone thinks I've got nothing to say. It's really frustrating. And you might be naturally reflective or introverted. You might need time to process your thoughts. And because of that, by the time you formed your opinion, how you're going to say it, the conversation has already moved on. Has that happened to you? You're a thinker. Some people, they speak before they think. Or before the question's even finished, they're already answering it. Or maybe you're one that's the opposite of that. You take time to collect, process. And by the time you've got what you want to say in English, the conversation's moved on. It's hideously frustrating, I think, even in your native language. But here's the key idea, okay? Disagreement is not aggression. You can disagree calmly. You can challenge someone respectfully. You can express uncertainty without sounding weak. It's not about changing who you are. It's not about putting on this different personality. It's about learning the language tools that allow you to speak clearly and politely. And that's where I love this topic. It's not about aggression. It's not about confrontation. We can all express our opinion. It's almost like a skill. It's a bit of an art that we've got to learn. So for a while, we're just going to go on to cultural nuance, particularly in British English, because we're known for suppressing our opinions. We're known for being indirect. British communication often softens disagreement. In some cultures, directness is seen as efficient and honest. In Britain, too much directness can sometimes sound abrupt or confrontational, especially in professional settings. And that's very true. I've noticed that when I've been fortunate to travel or live abroad. There's certain situations where they're very direct, but it gets the job done. Now, I know there's different European countries where they'll be very direct. They'll say exactly what they think, but it helps progression. Often in Britain, that's not very well received. It can often be viewed as abrupt, almost a bit harsh or confrontational. For example, perhaps in a workplace, someone presents an idea, you don't think it's going to work. In some cultures, they'll just say, no, that won't work. That won't work. This is clear. It says exactly what you think, which is great. But in a British workplace, of course, it's circumstantial. This could sound blunt. It could sound rude. So what you might hear in a British workplace setting, instead of that won't work, is I'm not entirely convinced that would achieve what we want, using many words to kind of soften the disagreement. Or you might hear, I wonder if we could explore another option. Or you could say one possible concern might be, and the reason we do this is it creates emotional space and it reduces tension. I'll be honest, speaking as a British man, I find this quite frustrating when people use so many words when they could just say, it won't work. If we could all just handle that, move on and not take it personally or be offended by it, we could be a lot more productive. But we don't really do that in British culture. We create emotional space and we reduce tension as much as possible, even when tension shouldn't really be the goal, but it's what happens. And you'll find that a lot in working for British companies. And British understatement is powerful. For example, that's quite interesting. Depending on tone, this can mean I'm politely disagreeing. You could, for example, it's quite interesting. I'm politely disagreeing. That's quite interesting. I don't love this. Or sometimes even it could mean, that's quite interesting. I strongly dislike this. Understanding this subtlety is essential. British communication often values tact, the way that we say something, over intensity. So particularly in a British workspace, what is our goal? Well, it's clarity, but delivered gently. We clearly express our opinion, so we know exactly what has been said, but we do it in a gentle way. And you might say, well, this is ridiculous, this is pointless, this is frustrating. It is, but it's what's important. So how do we do that? How do we clearly express our opinion? If we're nervous, if we're worried, if we think that we might create tension, we're going to have an argument, how can we deliver our opinion in a way that is clear, but gentle and tactful? Well, we're going to look at a few different settings, okay? Setting 1, casual conversations. Friends, family, social situations, might even be networking. In informal settings, the tone is relaxed, but blunt disagreement can still create tension. So, in social settings, you're just having chit-chat, general conversation, but one very blunt disagreement can create tension. So compare these two. Someone says something, a friend says something, an opinion, or they say something about someone or something, and you know it's incorrect. Well, look at these two options. You could say, that's wrong. In a certain setting, that's important. Perhaps in defense, they've said something that is completely incorrect. You would say, that's wrong. But that will immediately create tension. That might be what's needed in that scenario. But we're just talking general social settings. Or you could say, I see it a bit differently. I actually see it differently. What does that second version do? Well, you're saying the same thing. You're saying that you think it's wrong. But what it's doing is softening the disagreement, and it's showing respect. So perhaps someone says, I don't know, they give a bit of information perhaps about someone. There are situations where you would strongly disagree in defence, but we're not talking about that. Perhaps that they just say something that isn't quite right. Rather than saying that's wrong, you could say, I just see it a little bit differently. And it creates constructive conversation, doesn't it? Or perhaps you could say, I'm not sure I agree, to be honest. That's interesting. I think blah, blah, blah. From my perspective, I see what you mean, but I'm not completely convinced. Do you notice how many begin by acknowledging the other person, what they've said? Oh, that's interesting, but I think blah, blah, blah. I see what you mean, but I'm not completely convinced. This is such a common British conversational pattern. You acknowledge in a tactful way, and then you express your view. And you don't always need to apologise for your opinion, but softening delivery, it helps maintain connection. So there's a few little options there. And if you are watching along with the podcast, feel free, well, not that I've got any way of stopping you doing this, but take screenshots of the podcast just so you've got that as options there. But what about in a professional situation? So our second setting, work, meetings, academic contexts. Well, workplace disagreements are different, aren't they? They require diplomacy. We handle disagreements in a workplace different to what we would with a family member or a close friend. There's many times you've probably been on a call and something that someone says is ridiculous. You know that it's never going to work. Well, you can't just say, that won't work. You're being ridiculous, David, or whoever it is. It requires diplomacy. It requires tact. So let's imagine that somebody presents an idea of how your company should go about a project. You don't think it will work. So what could you say instead? Have we considered blah, blah, blah? I wondered if we might blah, blah, blah. One potential issue could be with what they've said. That's a great one. If someone says something, there's many issues, you could say, but one potential issue with that might be, I'm not entirely sure this approach will deliver the results we're aiming for. I like that one. I'm not entirely sure this is going to give the results we're aiming for. Or, a bit more direct, could we explore an alternative? All of these, they don't attack the person's idea. They invite discussion. And rather than just attacking what the person has said, because as soon as we do that, defences go up, don't they? They're done. If we considered, I wondered if we might, one potential issue could be, I'm not sure this approach is going to get the results we're looking for. Could we explore an alternative idea? Not attacking anyone, we're just promoting discussion. British professional culture often values collaboration and subtlety. Direct criticism might feel too strong unless the environment is very informal. The aim, really, in this setting is to challenge ideas without threatening the workplace relationship. But what about when it really matters? What about when we do need to strongly disagree? Sometimes someone says something and we genuinely disagree. And we disagree on the issue that we feel is important. When those situations, we clearly show that we disagree. It's important that we can do that. And this is where clarity matters, but so does our tone. So does the way that we say it. We can be firm without being aggressive. So let's imagine in your head now a statement that you personally disagree with. I'm not going to give you something because this is a personal thing. But imagine someone says a statement that you strongly disagree with. Well, we're firm without being aggressive. I respectfully disagree. I respectfully disagree. 3 words. Rather than you are wrong, I respectfully disagree. I understand your point, but I don't share that view. I can't agree with that. I see the situation differently. Again, the structure is simple. We acknowledge and then we give a clear statement. And this, confidence doesn't need to be loud. In fact, we often give these in a calm voice. And that often carries the most authority. You're not trying to win, you are contributing. And sometimes you are contributing by stating that you disagree. But sometimes we've got to be clear, haven't we, on something, that we don't think it's okay, or that we don't think it's right, or that we don't share that view. I respectfully disagree. I understand your point, but I don't share that view. I can't agree with that. I see the situation differently. And what's interesting is my natural inclination is often to put a sorry before these points. None of these options have got an apology. But there's an important area, is the power of intonation, the way that we speak, the tone. The words you choose are important, but how you say them can completely change the meaning. You can have the best vocabulary in the world, but if you say it in a certain way, it's going to completely change the meaning. So practicing tone, intonation, and the way that we say something, that makes a big difference. For example, let's take this sentence. I don't agree. 3 words. I don't agree. If you stress don't sharply, it can sound offensive. I don't agree. I don't agree. Emphasizing that, well, it's sharp, isn't it? If you say it quickly and loudly, it can sound confrontational. I don't agree. You're jumping in, I don't agree. Blah, blah. You know what I mean? The tone, the intonation, the way that we say something makes a big difference. If you lower your tone slightly and speak steadily, I don't agree. It sounds calm and confident. In British English, falling intonation at the end of a sentence often signals certainty. I don't agree. It's a statement. It's factual. Rising intonation can signal openness. So, for example, if I said, I'm not sure that's the best solution, the tone's going down. It's definite. I'm not sure that's the best solution. The tone's going up. It creates openness and an area of discussion. It's an invitation to discuss. So practicing intonation, honestly, it's just as important as learning phrases. Confidence is often heard in tone before it's heard in vocabulary. So you can kind of play around with that a little bit. Take 3 words like I don't agree, or go through the options that we've looked at in different scenarios. Try the intonation changes. Try different tones on different words to get the desired result. Sometimes you want to be clear. You want to be firm. Practice that. But the majority of the time, we want to just say it steadily, calmly, but clearly. So here's a little framework you can always use. And this is something that I'm quite proud of. I feel like you can kind of take away from this episode. There's a 3-step structure, particularly if you're stuck, but you want to express your opinion. Acknowledge, state your view, and then if you want, optional, a brief explanation. For example, I see what you're saying. I just think the timeline might be unrealistic given our resources. Or, that's a valid point. I personally feel we need more data before making a decision. The structure prevents abruptness and keeps the conversation balanced. You have acknowledged, you stated your view, and given a brief explanation. This is a brilliant way of expressing your opinion. But there's just one sentence. Sometimes we can get lost in words. we can get lost in it all. Acknowledge, state your view, and then a brief explanation. Using words isn't how using too many words doesn't give our opinion more strength. Often just clear, respectful is what it needs. So many people, it's true, they stay silent because they fear conflict, isn't it? But silence can become heavier than disagreement. Expressing your opinion calmly and respectfully is a skill. And as I always say, like any skill, it improves with practice. Confidence isn't about volume. It's about clarity. You don't need to argue. You don't need to dominate. You simply need to speak. And when you do it well, expressing your opinion becomes not a confrontation, but a contribution. So what do? We acknowledge, I see what you're saying. I understand your point. We then state our view. And if we want, we give a brief explanation. We've all really got a right to express our opinion, haven't we? Particularly if we want to progress in our career. And I've worked with so many learners of English that they come to me just so frustrated because they're not expressing their opinion. They're not saying what they think. Even they've got these incredible ideas because they can't keep up. They formulated their thoughts, they got what they want to say and it's moved on, or loads of different reasons. But this is something to practice. But it doesn't mean hundreds of words. It's in our tone. It's in our good choice of words. We clearly but gently state what we think. So I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Do you find it difficult to express your opinion? Are there any suggestions from this episode that you're going to take? Or have you got any other suggestions that you think could help us all to just feel a little bit more comfortable expressing our opinion? So thank you for watching or listening. If you did get to this point in the podcast, please write opinion in the comments. And I really honestly hope that this episode can help you just to have the confidence to sometimes speak up. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Have an amazing week ahead, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one, guys.